I wanted to take a moment today to talk about my latest obsession, which is Lancer. You've probably heard of Lancer. It's kind of a big deal in the sort of indie RPG market. But if you haven't heard, it's a game about giant robots. It's mecha combat. And they've got lots of different kinds. You've got your mech warrior style mechs all the way over to your anime Gundam stuff, and like the weird stuff, the science that we do not understand kind of technology. There's a lot of lore. I haven't gone through all the lore yet. I'm kind of like going through it a little bit at a time. I know I'm late to the scene. Lancer's been out for years, but I've been kind of waiting for a physical copy, which is why I'm very excited that next year they're going to be putting out a reprint of the core book. I love physical copies of books. I want to put them on my shelf. I want to have them in my hand. You know, I would really rather use physical books than PDFs. So once they announced that they were doing the reprint, I actually got the PDF and I've started looking through it, and I wouldn't to say I've been learning the game feels like an exaggeration. I've been looking at the game. I have learned several mechanics. I could not probably play a game right now just based on the knowledge that's in my head. I would still need to have the book for reference. But I have a general sense of how play goes, enough that I can read stat blocks and weapon stats and so basically understand what's going on. This has been kind of an obsession for me for the last several weeks, because as I go through the core book, I'm realizing that this game is a masterclass of how to excite players with character building options. Now, I made a video a little while back about how games should excite you to read. They should get you interested and inspired and excited to dive in and oh, I want to use that mechanic. I want to use that mechanic. This is what RPGs should do. Lancer does this in spades. Every single frame is evocative and exciting and interesting and oh my gosh, how could that be a reasonable thing for a player to have access to? These kinds of things. And it's particularly interesting to me because I've kind of never held that equipment is that exciting. Weapons and armor in a fantasy game, even with magical enchantments, they may be part of your build. They may be very useful. You might appreciate having them, but they really can't be the most interesting part about your character because they're not part of your character. They're gear, they're loot, they're basically a reward for a job well done, or they are, a buff that brings you up to par in power, or there's lots of different functions that a magical item or a special piece of gear might serve, but it's not part of the character, and so it's not that interesting as far as I'm concerned. I've never really found equipment to be all that interesting, except in the context of being part of a build in systems where magic item, players have greater agency over which magic items they get. It can be part of your build, and so it is something that you need to give some attention to. But it's never that evocative, it's not like a character trait. In Lancer, all the mechs and all of the equipment that you put on the mechs is ostensibly equipment. It's gear. It's stuff that you can swap out from mission to mission, and it's not part of your character. It's not part of your pilot. But nevertheless, they are written so well that you kind of forget about that. It's almost as if you're going to be swapping from one frame and one loadout to the next between missions, it's almost like you're playing a different character. That's how big a deal this stuff is. And that's to be expected for a game about giant mech combat. It's about the giant mechs and the pilots that are in them. The pilots are almost a secondary consideration. Obviously, if you are telling a story, the pilots are very important, and your characters are going to be making decisions, and you're going to be doing the role-playing and the interpersonal interactions. This is all going to happen in a standard campaign, but the majority of time spent at the table is probably going to be during combat in this deep tactical situation. where you are going to be primarily a mech that happens to have a pilot in it. Because your individual pilots, like your pilot stats do affect how you can build your mech, but they do not affect how your mech operates, if that makes any sense. Like your pilot stats affect how you're able to customize the mech, but like in play, your pilot stats do not enter into it. Your pilot stats are for narrative roles and role-playing scenes only. I mean, you can technically get out and operate as a pilot that way, but I have been assured that that is not something you really want to happen, which makes sense. So it's really interesting to me. Like it's not just that Lancer is interesting to me. What's interesting is seeing myself consume the content of that book and getting excited. And like, this is really, really cool stuff. So cool that like it's sort of like, filling up my mind, to the point that like, it's hard to think about other RPGs at the moment, because like, oh man, but isn't Lancer really cool though? Like, how would that kind of thing work in Lancer? And so if you are looking for just sort of a perfect example of the kind of games that I was talking about, and I think I did mention Lancer in my other video about RPGs should be exciting. I'm almost positive I did. But if you're looking for, like, I think Lancer might be the ideal example. Because I brought up things like, you know, Powered by the Apocalypse systems tend to have like really fun and evocative playbooks that, you know, give a strong sense of theme. And in Blades in the Dark, most of the special abilities that you can get and most of the playbooks there are just like really, really cool. And they evoke the whole character idea around each individual special ability. You're going to get several of them. But Lancer, I think, blows them all out of the water with regards to how very, very cool everything is. You've got NHPs, non-human persons, or these like sort of eldritch AIs that you can put into your mech, and they'll give you special abilities because they can sort of operate the mech independently of you while you are in it. But if your mech takes damage while you have an NHP, like there's a chance it's going to go a little crazy. And that's really cool. That's really cool. Because not only is that is a character, because NHPs are not just like automated systems. They're not like what we would consider AI. They are like actual persons. They are characters in their own right, fully developed. They have needs and wants and psyches themselves. And so this is a situation where the game mechanics are saying you can bring in a whole new character and have that character be your friend. But here's some complicated mechanics. You know, it's going to help you out unless you take some damage. And then you have to do like a reset to bring them back under control. And like the I don't want to say lore. It's not lore implication. I mean, it is kind of lore implications, but like the narrative implications, the sort of ethical quandaries of like having a person who is your slave and doesn't know it, but it's not a human. Is it really conscious? Probably. You know, these kinds of things. Like, it's just really interesting. And immediately allows for just huge amounts of character development and role play, in addition to being just really cool game mechanics. And that's awesome. I can't say enough good things about Lancer. And I haven't even played it yet. Like, I've observed Lancer communities and noted that, like, oh, this game seems to work really well. So I'm not concerned that the game is going to be bad, because I see how many people enjoy it. And sort of enjoy it in the same way that I enjoy tactical role-playing games. So I'm not concerned about that aspect. But all that I can speak to from personal experience is that the game mechanics are just really, really exciting. They inspire. They evoke the narrative that they are meant to. And that's really cool. So anyways, I guess this week's opinion is Lancer's pretty cool.